Alright, so we're checking out your Canon animation. It's pretty good. I like the creative way you use the squash and stretch here. You have strayed a little bit from what we go over in the book as far as the animation is concerned. Basically, what's happening here with your Canon animation. If we pull up our graph editor, we'll just go up here to Window, Animation Editors, Graph Editor. So, what's happening here is we've got this little pin that says In Mesh, okay? Basically, all of your animation that's happening here is kind of contained within the geometry information of your actual object, okay, rather than being set in individual keyframes just down at the bottom here. Okay, so it works fine as long as you never delete the history of your object. So let's talk for a minute about deleting history, because it's something we don't really go into detail about in the first class. Kudos for trying new things, for sure. I can see you're definitely trying out some different techniques, and that's great, actually. But the problem that you're going to run into with this is that when you start working on very large projects, basically the more you edit a particular model and add, more and more edge loops and change your geometry around, things can get quite complex. And when you have a scene that involves a lot of models or a lot of geometry, you're going to need to start deleting the history of those models. Basically, deleting history means you're deleting kind of this running record of everything that you've done to that model, okay? So, for example, you can check this out in the channel box /layer editor over here. Basically, if I grab this model and I come up to Edit Mesh and I decide I want to do Insert Edge Loop tool, and I click on it and I add a bunch of edge loops. As soon as I do that, it's going to show up right here in this area called Inputs, okay? That's showing up as Poly Split Ring 2, okay? I can do that again. There's another one, Poly Split Ring 3. So as I'm adding to my geometry or changing my geometry around, I'm adding to this kind of running history, this record of everything I've done. And it's actually an interactive record. I can come in later on and change things about this, okay, which is kind of what that history is used for. But as I said, as you start getting more and more complex scenes, you're going to run into problems with Maya no longer running quickly, okay, when you've got too much going on in one scene. So you'll be working with something and you'll move a vertex or something like that, and you'll click on it and you'll drag it somewhere, and it'll take a couple of seconds before Maya even reacts or moves that vertex, okay? Or you'll go to render something and it'll take forever. So you don't want that, for sure. So you'll be deleting histories. So let's see what happens when we actually do delete our history to our animation. If we come up here to Edit, Delete by Type History, I have the Canon selected right now. So we deleted the history. Everything looks fine. But you'll see there's no longer any animation. Okay, so that was kind of baked into the history of the object there, so you know, it's not always a good option for us. The other thing is, you know, I did change the geometry just then. You know, maybe I added something new, maybe I want it to look a little different. I decided that later. I decided to change it around. You know, maybe I want it to have like a little sight or something. Not that cannons have sights, but just for an example. And you don't have to actually do this or follow along. You know, you can just watch. Let's say, you know, I changed this. I decided I wanted to look like that instead. Okay, great. Now let's see what happens when I work with the animation. You can see any changes that I have made to the model later on just sort of disappear. Okay, just reappear later. So that's going to be a problem too. It means basically, you know, once we've done our animation in that way, we can't actually change our model at all if we decide we want something different, or if our art director decides we want something different. Okay? Just another quick note here. We've got kind of, it's a little off center, so right here, you know, we've got some funny stuff going on. So that's why we don't want to animate that way. But okay, then how do we do this a different way so that we don't have all those problems? Basically over here I've got a second cannon, alright, just like yours. And we're gonna go ahead and animate this cannon to create a similar effect to the one that you've got over here, okay? Now, first thing I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna rotate this a little bit. And that was a little weird because you can see right now my rotation tool is sitting on the ground here. Okay, so everything's rotating around this point on the ground. So maybe that's not an ideal place to use my rotation tool. Maybe something like this center back of the cannon would be a good place to perform my rotation. So to change this pivot point, okay, for my rotation tool, all I have to do is hold down the D key, D is in dog, and the V key, V is in vertex, alright? So hang on to both of those at the same time, and I can just click and drag this little yellow circle here, right up there to this kind of center vertex where everything meets, okay? And you can see now my rotation tool is centered right there, okay? So now when I rotate, it's going to rotate around from this point, okay? So I'm just going to move that a little bit. I want this to be pretty much just as close to totally horizontal as I can get it to be, okay? And at that point, I'm going to go ahead and freeze my transformations, okay? So I'll just come up here to modify, freeze transformations, and what this does, before we actually do it, what this does is it'll set all of these values over here back to 0, okay? And the good part about that is that that'll make this position kind of like a home position for me. So no matter where I move things, if I want things to pop back to this position right here, all I have to do is type in 0 in my values over here, okay? So I'm going to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. So now this is kind of like my home base. So, you know, no matter what kind of crazy stuff I get myself into, you know, just goes all wrong and I don't know what I'm doing anymore, I can always just come over here and zero these values out. You can see we're right back at this same position we started in, okay? So you might be asking at this point, you know, why do I want my kind of home base orientation to be like this and not maybe, you know, something more like this to start with? And I'll show you why. It has to do with when we're using our scale values, okay, to use the squash and stretch technique. So when my home base is like this, it's kind of oriented with the natural axes of the world. Okay, so we've got Y is just straight up and down. We've got our X going in this direction and our Z going in this direction. Okay, so this is pretty well situated along that Z-axis. So it makes it pretty easy for us to go ahead and scale. We can make this, you know, super tiny if we want. We can change this here. And it's going to scale and it's, you know, going to look still nice and round, alright? It's just scaling in along that Z-axis. And you'll find that because this is my home orientation, even when I rotate this, I can still change that scale Z, and it's gonna work out really well for me. Now, you know, let's see what happens when we change that home orientation to something that's already kind of rotated on a different sort of angle from the rest of the world, alright? So we rotated it up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and freeze my transformations again, modify, freeze transformations. So I've made this kind of my home position now, alright? So, you know, no matter what I do with this, if I just come over here and I put all zeros, it's going to pop back to that, okay? Now what happens when I change my scale Z is it's still going to squash it down along the Z-axis, okay, which is, you know, horizontal in this direction here. But because it was already angled upwards, the squash effect really doesn't create the desired effect that we were hoping it would. So now, you know, even if I rotate it, it's just not gonna look pretty, okay? So it's important to consider those sort of issues if you know you're gonna be using scale and rotations in an animation, okay? So, so just hit the Z button to go back to, you know, the previous state that I had there where this was my home base, right? This nicely oriented cannon, okay? And so at this point I can start animating this and setting some keyframes for it, all right? So I'm on frame 1 right now, all right? And I've got my cannon selected. I've got my pivot point at the back of the cannon here. And I think, you know, we'll just start by setting a key here, okay? So we can just grab all these guys. And we could just right click, key selected. Okay, so those are all keyed. We can come in a little further here, you know, and I'll just kind of follow the animation that you have going on with your cannon over there for now, okay? So frame 18 here, it'll be squishing back, okay? So for this frame, we'll just go to our scale here. And we can, you know, go ahead and go with something pretty small. Let's try 0.4. And of course, when we squish something down like that, all this volume has to bow out somewhere, okay? To avoid losing mass. So we'll also want to take our scale Y and our scale X and make them larger. I'll try 1.4. Let's see how that goes. It's okay. And then we'll just go ahead and key those. Now this time, you know, we didn't actually move anything in any of these the translate or rotate or anything. We just worked with scale. So I'm just going to grab the scale values this time and just right click and select key selected. Okay. So let's see what we got going on. Alright, so we've got the cannon squishing down and getting ready to shoot the cannonball. Okay. So, you know, what's happening with your cannon back there is pretty all of a sudden. Okay. Maybe a little too fast. But, you know, it's good. So, we'll come to frame 24 here. Alright. And we'll go ahead and do that kind of same thing. I'll put our scale back to 1, 1, and 1. Alright. Just our natural scale. Grab those. Key selected. And we'll see what we got now. Okay. So there goes cannon shooting. Alright. That's fine. Now, just a suggestion for something you may want to do to push this even further. You may want to actually stretch out the cannon a little bit as well, okay, at this point, before it goes back to being just normal size. It's going to give a little more spring to your animation. It doesn't have to be anything drastic, but what I'm going to do here is just make the cannon a little bit longer, okay? So I'll try 1.2. And of course, if we make it longer, we're going to have to thin it out in X and Y directions, okay? So we'll try maybe 0.8. Let's key those. Let's see how that looks instead. So we're squishing it down, it's shooting out, and then it should pretty rapidly come back to just its normal scale. So I'm on frame 27 now, and I'm just changing this all to 1, 1, and 1, just our regular scale for our cannon. I'm keying those. So let's see what we've got now. It's squishing back, shooting out. It's even stretching a little at that point before it comes back to its regular size. Okay? It's just going to add a little bit of emphasis to that shooting motion. Alright? And so at this point, you know, our cannon animation is pretty much where we want it to be. It's fine, you know. So we can also rotate it at this point to the angle we want it to be. Okay, so I can go to, let's go with 20. Why not? And now we have keys on rotate X. And we actually probably didn't need them. So just make sure that you rekey that. once you change the value, okay? So there we go. Got our animation, our cannon animation looks good. Just like that. Shoo. Now the next thing is the ball here, okay? This one over here, we got a lot going on with it. There's a whole bunch of keys in here. So you can see it's going up and down and before shooting out, okay? So, you know, we can do something a lot simpler with that. So I've got another cannonball over here waiting, alright? I haven't frozen the transforms on it yet, so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to come up to Modify, Freeze Transforms. Okay, so it's nice and clean and ready to be worked with at this point. Okay, so obviously, you know, at the beginning here, not going to be a lot going on with the ball. All right. Now, because this cannon is coming back pretty far, you know, maybe my ball has got to come back pretty far as well, so that it's still inside the cannon at that point. Okay. So there it is, back there. Okay, so now we're not accidentally seeing it early, but probably right about, you know, there, we'll want to see the cannonball launching out of the cannon, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and, at frame 1, I'm just going to go ahead and hit S, set a key, okay, for my cannonball. Oh, by the way, since I moved my cannonball to a new starting position, I'm going to freeze my transforms again. And then I'm going to set a key. Alright, by hitting S on the keyboard, set key, okay? So then I'm going to come over to the frame where I really want to start seeing the cannonball come out of the cannon, which is probably about 23. And I'm going to place it right about there. So something you might kind of notice about the cannonball, now that I've sort of thinned out the cannon a little bit during this animation, is that it's, you know, kind of big for this opening, right? You know, it's maybe would come out of that cannon, but you know, it's not looking not looking too promising. So another thing that you might want to kind of keep in mind is that our scale tool here is oriented kind of not ideally, alright, for this type of arc. We've got our cannonball kind of coming up this way at this angle, so, you know, for example, if it's flying through the air, it's not going to be stretching like this, okay? It's going to be going in this kind of a direction, alright, stretching in that direction. So the stretch should sort of match the direction that it's traveling. So what I want to do with the cannonball is actually change the angle of it a little bit. I'm just going to rotate it a bit, okay? So that when I get that scale tool, it'll be scaling in a direction I'm happy with, okay? So we've got it rotated, alright? We're happy with that rotation. And so let's go ahead and give it a little bit of stretch so that it looks that it's going to look like it's traveling quickly, and also it's going to be able to fit through the end of the cannon here. Okay? So I'm just going to scale it out in Z. So I'll go 1.2, maybe more, 1.4. And we could try 0.7. Let's try 0.7. Why not? I'm gonna make this a little smaller after all. Let's try 1.3. So there it is. Just starting to come out of the cannon there. I'm gonna go ahead and set these keys. Key selected. And I'm going to continue the travel of this cannonball to way up here, somewhere off in the blue. Okay, and I'll key that as well. So let's see what we've got going on. Here it goes. Okay, so obviously we have a problem, right? The cannonball is traveling out of the cannon before the cannon actually fires. So that's kind of a job for our graph editor to handle. Alright, so we come up to Window, Animation Editors, Graph Editor. We can see a breakdown, a beautiful colorful breakdown here of the travel of the ball. Okay, so we've got values here that we can mess with for translate, rotate, and scale. So because this is a problem with the ball traveling out of the cannon before its time, it has to do with translate. Alright, so let's look at our translate values. If we just grab these three, we've got our translate X, translate Y, and our translate Z. And we can adjust these, right, as we need to. So, translate X, nothing going on there. It's staying the same all the time, okay, so not particularly interesting, and we won't worry about it. Translate Y, this is how far up the ball is going, okay? So at this point, the ball is traveling upwards a little bit, okay, out of the cannon. Also, in our translate Z, this is the ball traveling forward, okay, this curve right here. We can see anywhere there's a curve, there's a change. So this curve right here is representing movement, okay? And this is, in this case, in Translate Z, this is a forward movement in Translate Z of the ball, okay? So it's saying, hey, start moving the ball forward. All of this right here. And really, we don't want the ball to start moving forward or up at all until it gets to right here, okay? So how can we fix this? How can we make it stop moving around before we want it to? And the answer is that we can actually change these curves to make it do that. All right, we can grab. I'll just start with Translate Y just to demonstrate. Okay, we can just grab these guys right here. I just marquee selected those. Okay. And we can change the mode here to something called step tangents. Alright, when I hit step tangents, it's going to change the curves to these kind of stairs, right, where it'll just go straight, and then it'll suddenly pop up and go straight and subtly pop up. Alright? Now actually I was a little over ambitious with that, because if we check out what happens now, okay, the ball's not really moving up anymore. It's still moving forward because we haven't messed with translate Z yet. This is translate Y that we're working with. So it's not moving up, it's not moving up, and then suddenly it pops up, and then it's not moving up, not moving up, not moving up. And then at 48 it'll just zoom, pop right up. Okay. So that's not quite it either, right? I'm gonna Z back. And so I, have accidentally grabbed this guy right here too when I changed to step mode. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab the one on the end here, this first one, and then click on step tangents here. Okay, so what's happening now is that this first part of the timeline, okay, from 1 to 23, is in step mode. So it's gonna just travel without moving upwards. Then it's just going to pop into place at 23, and then it's going to slowly curve into its new position up here. Okay, so it's going to slowly travel upwards in a smooth curve. So let's watch what that looks like. It's still going to be traveling forward all the time because, again, we haven't messed with translate Z, which is controlling that forward travel, but we should have the upward travel under control. Okay, so it's not going up, it's not going up, it's not going up, it suddenly pops up there, and now it's going at a nice gradual curve upwards. Alright, so that's fine. Now let's also do the same thing with translate Z. We don't want it to start moving forward until it gets to frame 23. Alright, so again we'll just grab this first one, come up here, and we'll change it to step tangents. That's what we get. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, so now we have the ball not traveling out of the cannon early, okay? It's just appearing right where we need it to be, right there, at the appropriate time, and then traveling on upwards, okay? Now, at the moment it's traveling in a pretty straight line. Depending on how strongly your cannon is shooting, it could travel in an arch or anything like that, but I think this is fine for now, okay? So see it just like that. And now, even when we delete our history, okay, we delete the history of this, our animation is still going to be there. If we delete our history of our cannon as well, it's still going to animate. Whereas these guys over here, we delete the history, and it's just going to sit there. Alright? So there you go, squash and stretch. Let me know if you have any questions about anything we went over in the video today. And thanks for watching, and happy animating!